The studio hums with the familiar rhythm of a late-night show, cameras gliding, band-ready, audience warmed up to laugh on cue and clap when the sign lights up. Jimmy Kimmel sits behind his desk, relaxed, confident, writing, the comfort of routine while the producers count seconds in their head. Then Clint Eastwood walks out and the temperature shifts in a way that cannot be scripted. He does not rush, he does not play to the crowd, he simply arrives carrying decades of presence that no applause can add to or take away. The audience cheers loudly at first out of habit and admiration, but as Clint settles into the chair the noise tapers into something quieter, more attentive. Jimmy opens with jokes, light ones about Hollywood legends, about time, about how Clint has seen every version of this industry. Laughter rolls across the seats, but Clint only smiles faintly, a polite acknowledgement, not an invitation. His eyes stay alert, reading intention behind every word. Jimmy leans forward, sensing resistance, and tries again, adding a sharper edge, a joke about Clint being out of touch, about old values in a new world. The audience laughs again, but less confidently, sensing friction beneath the humor. Clint responds calmly, saying he believes some values do not expire with age. The line lands heavy and the crowd applauds instinctively. Jimmy laughs it off and pivots, but the rhythm is already off balance. He moves toward politics, a territory he knows well, framing a question that feels less like curiosity and more like a trap wrapped in wit. Clint listens without interrupting, hands folded, posture relaxed but grounded. When he answers, he does not take the bait. He speaks about nuance, about experience, about how real conversations are not won with applause signs. The room goes quiet enough to hear the band members shift in their seats. Jimmy interrupts with a joke, trying to keep things light, but Clint finishes his sentence anyway, never raising his voice, never showing irritation, only certainty. He says he came to talk about work, storytelling, responsibility, and craft, not to play a role written for him by someone else. The audience responds with scattered applause, unsure of protocol but compelled by authenticity. Jimmy's smile tightens and he says it is all in good fun, that this is comedy and everyone gets teased. Clint nods slowly and says teasing is different from talking down. The words hang in the air, heavier than laughter. The camera cuts to the crowd, some smiling, some wide-eyed, sensing something real is happening, live and unfiltered. Jimmy attempts to regain control, tossing out a self-deprecating remark, but then circles back, pressing Clint again, asking if he thinks he is above criticism. Clint answers without hesitation, saying criticism is earned when it is honest, not when it is manufactured for reaction. The audience applauds louder this time and the energy tilts away from the desk toward the guest chair. Jimmy tries to interrupt again, but Clint gently raises his hand, a small gesture but powerful, reclaiming space without aggression. He says, "Let me finish," and the room obeys. He speaks about respect across generations, about listening before laughing, about how easy it is to cheapen a conversation when the goal becomes clips instead of connection. Producers glance at each other off camera, aware this is slipping beyond the planned beats. Jimmy chuckles nervously, trying to steer back to humor, but the moment resists. Clint's voice remains steady, controlled, carrying the weight of someone who has nothing to gain from approval. He says he values honest exchange, and if that cannot happen, he is comfortable stepping away. A hush falls over the studio, the kind that rarely exists on late-night television. Jimmy waves his hands, saying, "No, we are having fun, stay with us," but the plea feels thin. Clint smiles politely, thanks him for the invitation, and begins to stand. The audience gasps, then applauds loudly, some rising to their feet, moved by the quiet defiance. Jimmy laughs awkwardly, suggesting this will make great TV, but his words trail as Clint straightens his jacket, nods to the band, and turns toward the exit. Cameras scramble to follow, unsure whether to frame the desk or the departing legend. Clint walks with unhurried confidence, not angry, not flustered, simply done. The applause grows fuller, warmer, no longer prompted by signs but by instinct. As Clint disappears behind the curtain, the studio feels suddenly exposed, like a joke told too far. Jimmy sits back, attempting a smile, thanking the audience as the band plays a louder riff than usual, trying to cover the awkwardness. The segment cuts to commercial, leaving viewers at home stunned, replaying the moment in their minds, already knowing they just witnessed something unscripted, something rare, a line drawn calmly on live television. Backstage, the applause still echoes faintly as Clint Eastwood walks down the narrow hallway lined with cables and hurried footsteps. Crew members slow, instinctively giving space, not because he demands it but because his calm authority makes it feel appropriate. A young assistant starts to apologize, then stops, unsure what to say. Clint gives a small nod, not unkind, not dismissive, just final. Outside the studio the night air feels cooler, cleaner, as if a door has closed on something artificial. His car waits, engine humming, and as he settles into the seat his phone buzzes repeatedly, messages already piling up. He does not look at them. He gazes out the window watching the city slide by, thinking not about headlines but about how easily conversation has been replaced by confrontation. Inside the studio Jimmy returns from commercial, forcing energy into his voice, joking about surprises and live television, but the laughter comes late, uneven. The audience senses the shift and the band plays louder than usual, filling gaps that jokes cannot. Producers whisper urgently, debating whether to address the moment directly or let it fade. Jimmy chooses a brief acknowledgement, saying he respects Clint and that sometimes conversations get passionate. It lands politely but without conviction. By the time the show ends the staff knows this will not fade. Within minutes clips flood social media, framed by bold captions declaring victory, humiliation, meltdown depending on the angle. Comment sections explode, splitting along familiar lines, yet many agree on one thing: something genuine happened. Commentators replay Clint's raised hand, his steady voice, his refusal to escalate. Media panels debate whether comedy has become too sharp, whether guests are being invited for conflict rather than curiosity. Some accuse Clint of being thin-skinned, others praise him for setting boundaries. Meanwhile he arrives home quietly, stepping into a space far removed from studio lights. He pours a drink, sits in a chair worn by years, and allows himself a long breath. No statement is drafted, no publicist summoned. He believes moments should stand on their own. The next morning headlines argue with each other. One claims a legendary blow-up, another calls it a masterclass in composure. Jimmy opens the following night with a monologue carefully calibrated, acknowledging the moment with humor while insisting no hard feelings. The laugh track responds, but the tone remains cautious. Guests after Clint appear more guarded, measuring words, sensing that viewers are watching differently now. Across talk shows and podcasts the incident becomes shorthand for a larger tension between spectacle and substance. Younger hosts debate whether restraint still works in a world driven by outrage. Older voices recall a time when disagreements unfolded without ambush. In film circles colleagues share quiet messages of support for Clint, noting his consistency over decades, the same man on and off camera. Days pass and the clip continues to circulate, not because of shouting but because of its absence. Viewers notice how little Clint says and how much weight each pause carries. Teachers share it in media classes discussing power dynamics and live broadcasting. Fans write long posts about respecting elders, about listening across differences. Critics counter that public figures should expect provocation. The argument stretches on, but the image remains simple: a man standing calmly, choosing to leave rather than play a part he did not agree to. Jimmy invites analysts onto his show to talk about civility in comedy, framing the conversation as growth. Ratings bump briefly, then normalize. The machine keeps moving. Weeks later at a film festival a reporter asks Clint about the night. He smiles lightly and says television is a conversation and conversations work best when both sides are listening. He adds that walking away is sometimes the most honest response. No bitterness, no lecture, just perspective. The crowd applauds, appreciating the restraint. Jimmy sends a private note wishing him well and thanking him for coming on. Clint replies with a short message wishing him success. The exchange never becomes public, and that feels right. In retrospect the moment gains a quiet legacy. It is referenced when guests push back gently, when hosts recalibrate tone, when audiences question why conflict is framed as entertainment. It does not change the industry overnight, but it plants a marker. Somewhere between laughter and silence there is a line, and on that night it became visible. Clint Eastwood did not storm off in anger as some headlines claimed. He stood up with composure and chose his exit deliberately, reminding everyone watching that dignity does not require volume. The studio lights eventually dim, the set resets, but the lesson lingers that sometimes the most powerful statement on live television is knowing when to leave.